Do you remember what chapter we were in? 2 Samuel chapter
9. 8. I was close.
Are you sure? Because like I'm looking at where I left off and 7? You sure? We did. Well, I really like the discussion, but we are lost. We're chapter 8. Yeah, you were close. I know. It was just missed it by a mile. This week is chapter 9. No, I said last week we were in chapter 8. Last week. Stop, y'all, or I'm going to make security call y'all out. So now, we're over in chapter 9. And chapter 8 was basically a listing of David's great victories. David had secured the land and had slain a whole host of folks. And you kind of see where it looks like David is kind of pulling together a lot of things within his own kingdom. And as you saw, he was bringing security to the borders of his kingdom. And this week we have a very interesting discussion about a man by the name of Mephibosheth. So let's begin right here. And David said, "Is there anyone left of Saul's house that I might show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of the house of Saul whose name was Ziba, and they called him to David. And the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" And he said, "I am your servant." And the king said, "Is there still not someone of the house of Saul that I might show the kindness of God to him?" And Ziba said to the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is a cripple, or he is crippled in his feet." And the king said to him, "Where is he?" And Ziba said to the king, "He is in the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, in Lodabar." You didn't think I'd be able to do that, did you? Then King David sent and brought him from the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, at Lodabar. And Mephibosheth, David's the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David and fell on his face and paid homage. And David said, "Mephibosheth." And he answered, said, "Behold, I am your servant." And David said to him, "Fear not, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan, and I'll restore all the land of Saul to your land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always." We're going to stop right there. All right. Who is Mephibosheth? Jonathan's son. Remember when he became a cripple? And his daddy got killed. It's still in 2 Samuel. Do you remember the chapter? Just very brief. It's like a snippet. It's chapter 4, verse 4. Mephibosheth is being carried. He's 5 years old, and he is dropped, and he becomes lame. So, David's request to find out if there's anyone of Saul's household that he can show kindness to. Now, this is kind of an interesting thing. When typically a king takes the place of another king, what usually happens to the lineage of the other family? They all kind of die. It's like a very bad episode of The Sopranos, or like Goodfellas, and it's not. Don't think that because it's called Goodfellas, it's a great movie. A lot of people die in that movie, tragically. It's kind of like a bad mafioso movie when they come along and they just like go, "Hey, it's time to wipe out the whole family." Anyone seen The Godfather? I know Delight's not here. Seen The Godfather? Anyone else? The Godfather, The Godfather, The Godfather, The Godfather. Right? When they make a move against Vito, they make a move against Sonny and everybody else, right? And, well, no, they don't all die. Sonny dies. Yeah. You've not seen this movie. Hush. So anyhow, what happens is, typically when a king takes over and he is beginning to cement his reign, he begins to ask questions like, "So, did the other king have any other people that I could be nice to?" Think about it. When Herod finds out there's a rival to his throne, how does Herod handle it? "Go find the child so I can kill it." What does he say? Find me that baby so I can go and worship that poor little bitty baby Jesus, 6 pounds, 8 ounces, 20 inches long, something like that. No, that's not what happens. But notice Jonathan uses a very unique, or David uses a very unique word. How many of y'all have the word translated kindness in your Bible? Kindness, kindness, loving faithfulness. Okay. Whoa, that was cool. Kindness is in the NIV. This word is the Hebrew word hesed. Hesed has a very unique phraseology. It has a very unique form. And it has a very unique understanding in Hebrew culture. It's not simply, let me go and be nice to him. When God delivers the children of Israel out of Egypt, he is practicing his chesed to Israel, his covenantal faithfulness. The word actually, kindness is actually a really poor translation. Sometimes you'll have loving kindness, sometimes you'll have your covenantal lovingness of it in there. To bring this word into English is to have more modifiers than you can bring in. God's unfailing, undying, unwavering, self-binding, covenantal love, trust, compassion. It's all those words rolled into one. It's a long discussion within the lexicon itself. And what David is saying when he says, let me show kindness to this young man, is I'm not going to kill the young boy. I'm not going to ferret him out so he can die mysteriously. I'm going to show him the same kind of love and kindness that God shows Israel. And why? You want to know why? He has a covenant between Jonathan and David. Yeah, but Jonathan's dead. Jonathan's dead. I mean, he's gone, Saul's gone. All the ability for David to be able to keep that covenant. Who's going to make David keep that covenant, though, Bro Walter? He's the king. What? I won't go back down that road because there's a rabbit trail there, and we'll stay away from that. Read your newsletter. There. I covered it that way. Let me show him this covenantal faithfulness. Does Mephibosheth deserve it? Does he deserve it? Huh? Did he earn it? Is there anything about Mephibosheth where he deserves this covenant other than the fact that David makes it? I mean, when kings come into power, what's the standard for kings when they come into power? They kill the whole family. So what David is doing is far beyond what anybody else would do who comes into power. Certainly, if Saul had the opportunity, Saul would not show David's family this level of kindness, would he not? No. This is a radical concept that David is doing. And here's the thing. While the covenant wasn't between David and Saul, it was the covenant between David and Jonathan. That's true. That's true. You're absolutely correct. And so David is going to fulfill the oath that he makes to Jonathan. But here's the thing, Brother Walter. David and Jonathan were the only ones that were there. I was there. A God guy. Does he really pay attention? Yes. Does he? Yes. You sure? Yes. I don't know. I think he was sleeping at that moment. He was watching the Rangers. He was watching the Rangers? In the future lose, wasn't he? They won today. He's like, yes, score one for the home team. God's actually a Tigers fan, and the reason... No, I'm just kidding. I am a Rangers fan. I don't know how I do it. I root for both the Tigers and the Rangers, but when they play each other... Anyhow. Never say things are impossible. So I would like to demonstrate to Jonathan something that Jonathan, by the fact of a new king, would have been eliminated, and demonstrate this unique form of faithfulness to him. And let's see what David does. Now, it's one thing. David could have honored the covenant and spared him, right? But is that all David does? Think about it. What does David do? Notice David goes and he calls for a man by the name of Ziba. Now, Ziba is a kind of a treacherous guy. A few weeks from now, we're going to see where Ziba kind of lies to David. I know. Somebody in Saul's household lying. I'm shocked. So they bring Ziba in, and Ziba says, I'm your servant. And he says, is there one of Saul's house that I may show this kindness to? Same word, this covenantal faithfulness. Now, notice who he puts it on. First, it's for Jonathan's sake. Now, who's it for? The kindness of whom? Of God. Going to what Brother Walter and I were going back and forth talking about, who really is the arbiter of this covenant? Who really is the arbiter of the oath that Jonathan and David have taken? It's God. And so he is now bound to show this covenantalness, and he's tying it to the covenantal faithfulness that God demonstrates to his people, and that God has demonstrated to David. Did God make David an oath? Did he tell David he would be a great king? Be a great house? Last chapter we read where David whooped up on everybody from Egypt all the way over to the Euphrates. David was a powerful kingdom, or the children of Israel were a powerful king under David. So let me demonstrate this same level of covenantal faithfulness of God to him. And Ziba said to the king, there is still the son of Jonathan. He's a cripple in his feet. And the king said to him, which I kind of think is kind of odd language, he's a cripple in his feet. You could have just said he's a cripple, or he has bad feet. But the emphasis is, well, his feet are badly damaged. I just thought that was weird. The king said to him, where is he? And Ziba says he's down at this guy's house in the land of Lodabar. And David sent for him, and he comes up. Now notice the exchange here. When David brings him in, how does Mephibosheth behave? Are they equals? He behaves in the way as someone who should be a slave or servant unto David. Notice David looks at him and says, Mephibosheth, and he answers, behold, I am your servant. Now, we talked about this morning. I don't know if your classes talked about this morning, when David just kind of rode up on the priests at Nob, and they were kind of worried of whether or not David was there to do a little drive-by, bang, 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 kill a couple of priests, and then go on his way, or whether or not what David was doing. And it was a very interesting conversation.
Well, if you read down in verse 8, it tells how Mephibosheth felt about himself. He's considered whether you should notice a dead dog like me.
That's right. Very interesting language, is it not? So he views...
A person with a handicap back in those days really looked down on because what sin did you commit?
Well, that's one of them. And his grandpa certainly committed a ton of them, didn't he? So, and they did believe that these things transmit. And so, but you have a guy that comes before the king who could have easily believed that he is being brought there. No, really, the king loves you. He's going to spend some time with you. Yeah, I'm hearing a mandolin play all the way to Jerusalem. Godfather reference? No? Okay. Y'all got to watch that, folks. You got to watch it. You'll pick up so many more references that way. David says, do not fear. I will show you same terminology, covenantal faithfulness for the sake of your father Jonathan. Now, David could have stopped right there and sent Mephibosheth on his way, and could have claimed he honored his oath. Right? Didn't kill him, took care of him, met him, meet and greet. How you doing, cripple boy? Yeah? Okay, you've got nothing you can benefit me. And notice what happens here. Does he have anything that benefits David? I don't know of too many armies that ride into battle with crippled people. Except for our army that had everybody on P2 profiles going to war. But anyhow, that's another story. I was one of them. Look, I was deployable, but I couldn't run. It was going, that's interesting. All right. Motivated properly, you can run. Notice what David does. He could have simply just said nice things to him, sent him on his way, give him a little tract of land, and off he goes. But look at what David understands as covenantal faithfulness. Look at the extent of where David goes for his covenantal faithfulness. I will restore to you a fourth of the land of Saul your father, and every third Sunday you will eat at my table. Always. That would have been enough, right? I mean, that's all he would have had to have done. And he's already doing more than that by doing that. Notice what he does. I will, for the sake of your father, restore to you all the lands of Saul your father. Saul had a lot of lands. When he became king, he sucked up a lot of land. And you will eat at my table always. What is the significance of eating at the king's table all the time? Who eats with the king? And family. The advisors, heads of state, and family all sit at the king's table, right? Who is this young man being treated as? As family. I'm going to give you your father's work. I'm going to give you your father's land. All that your father had is going to be yours. Now, he's a cripple boy, so he really can't do much farming, right? He can't, can he? Unless it's got levers up high, but he's not hitting that brake for save his life. Yeah, he's going to be zero turning a lot. And he paid homage. He said, what is your servant that you regard him for a dead dog such as I? Notice how David understands the covenant that he takes with Jonathan. Very easily, David could have simply said, Jonathan's dead, my covenant is complete, and walk away. Notice that Jonathan doesn't do that. And Jonathan could have notice David doesn't do it. And David could have said, well, I've honored the covenant by taking care of him. I've given him a place to live in and people to watch over him in case he gets any weird ideas. And I'm taking care of it. David does something that is really just astronomically weird for the culture of its day. To return back to an heir of the former king, all the land of the king, and then to treat the former heir of the heir of the former king as his own family member is radically unheard of, except for in this text.
But he and Jonathan were great friends.
Yeah, he and Jonathan were great friends. This cat, he doesn't know from Adam. You got it. Which is really radically different amongst heads of states than at that time. Because if you read some of the stuff that goes on, there's a lot of people being plotted to be killed. Just look at Roman history. And the ways emperors came and went and how the Praetorian Guard helped bring all that mess in. There's a lot of treachery, backstabbing, and miscellaneous people dying. You have the same thing in Egypt, and you have the same kind of power plays in many of the other countries. Rarely, if I would almost be willing to say, if ever, does a king ever do something like this.
But David was an unusual king.
He was a very unusual king. He was. Well, yes. Then the king called Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, all that belonged to Saul and all his house I have given to your master's grandson. You and your sons and your servants shall tend the land for him. Now, poor Ziba may have started a new career, and his new career got sidetracked. You think Ziba's going to tell the king, hey, look, I can't help. I don't want to do this. Not really. In chapter 16, we'll see where Ziba kind of tells a fib and gets the land that he was really after to begin with. David assigns Saul's servant to run Mephibosheth's house. But where does Mephibosheth stay? Does he go to Saul's lands, which would be in the land of the tribe of Benjamin, or where does he stay? Which is where? David's house in Jerusalem, which is in what tribe? There you go. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, will always eat at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants, and he said to the king, according to all that my Lord commands all his servants, so will your servant do. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. And Mephibosheth had a young son, and his name was Micah. Here it's spelled one way. Over in Chronicles, Chronicles is spelled slightly differently. Don't get wrapped around the axle at that. That's not uncommon. And all who lived in Ziba's household became Mephibosheth's servants. So Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem, for he ate always at the king's table. Now he was lame in both feet. Is there anything you find odd about David's kindness? I find it odd. From David? Okay. Okay.
Mephibosheth would technically be the heir to the throne, so he could be seen as a threat.
He could be seen as a threat. You have this guy in your own household, and yet, is he really a threat?
Well, you also keep an eye on him, too.
Well, that's one way some people look at that. All this covenant talk is just really a means by which David could keep an eye on it. I tend to go with the text because it typically is authoritative or it's not, and I go with the authoritative.
How many times David had a chance to do Saul?
Repeatedly. Okay.
But yet he showed kindness to him because he found that was his, that he was still his sovereign.
Okay.
And so I think those same characteristics that carried on there to Mephibosheth,
Yeah.
the same kindness and same respect.
Okay. 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 Mephibosheth was a young man. He was 5 when he fell. And then, again, it depends on where we are within the story here. So it depends on where you are within it. If you look at last week's as chronological, not recapping, it'll change some things. Most folks put him as a young youth, probably in his upper teens, early 20s. Some might put him a little bit older. The text itself here doesn't reveal where his age is, but yet he's young enough. And so, because it calls him, does it call him a young man here in the text? And it says he has a young son. Well, I can't remember, I didn't remember reading if it said they called him a young man here in the text as well.
His young son, his name is Micah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me ask you this question. Let me figure out how to phrase it properly first. No. Well, go back to this covenantal faithfulness that God has. I mean, this is really quite a radical terminology. You see it, if you were here for our study in Ruth, it appears a couple of times in the book of Ruth. It appears a bunch of times in the book of Jonah. It's really more of the language of God's faithfulness to his people, and David is utilizing that concept with Mephibosheth. He could have simply have, as I've said a couple times, just been really nice to the guy. Is Mephibosheth deserving of all this great stuff that David is providing for him? He's the son of a rebel, essentially. His kingdom, Saul's kingdom, was rent from Saul's hand, and God tells Saul that he will no longer be king. David is now made king. Saul is really basically a false king on a false throne, and Mephibosheth is the grandson of that false king. Is he really deserving of all this nice stuff?
He's the son of Jonathan,
Yeah, great.
who was a great friend.
Of David, that they swore what with? Okay. Okay, and he swears an oath to Jonathan's son, right? To Jonathan. Swears an oath to Jonathan, but to take care of Jonathan's families, right? Okay. You're seeing a little bit more of a relationship than just somebody being nice to someone, right?
Yeah, I mean, these two guys were out, they were in caves, they were camping, they were in the thick of the fight, and then one of them fell. They probably would have taken care of each other's families no matter which one of them fell. And I think David was honoring that.
Okay. Okay. Anybody see this going beyond just the story of David and Mephibosheth? Huh? There we go. This isn't simply just David being kind. This is David demonstrating God's kindness to people that don't really deserve God's kindness. There's nothing about, think about it. He is a crippled, illegitimate heir. And David takes the young man. The young man is treated as one of David's sons. Land is restored to him that his father once had. All of this goes beyond basically what David and Jonathan really swore an oath towards. It exceeds that level of compassion. David is demonstrating what God would demonstrate, I believe, to a lot of us. You want to bring it to an overly spiritual point. Anybody see that besides young Kyle back there at the back?
Well, in the covenant in 2014, he said, "But show me unfailing kindness like that of the Lord as long as I live."
Yep.
So that I may not be killed. Do not ever cut off your kindness from my family.
Yep.
So Jonathan
Mentions both those terms, and that terminology is the exact same terminology of here within the text we have right here. But don't cut off your kindness to my family does not mean complete restoration of my family's land and sitting at my table all the time and even eat there every night, now does it?
It's definitely not the least you can do.
Exactly. What David does isn't the very minimum of what the oath required. What David demonstrates is the maximum of what the oath would require. You see the difference? Don't cut off your kindness to my family. Okay, I won't. I will give them a home to live in, or he can still stay there and he can receive a stipend from the king's purse. No, he doesn't do that. He can come and live at my house occasionally, but you know how it is when people live in your home for a little bit of time, and you start having conversations like, "So, it's great to have you. Love having you around. But have you found a villa that you could move to?"
Let me introduce you to the realtor.
You know? You don't stay as long as you want. No, I mean it, stay. By the way, you all know that that's code for get your stuff out of my house, right? Right? That's what it means. Hey, but the fact of the matter is, and Stan brings up a point, the covenant is that he doesn't remove the kindness from John's family. But again, we're talking about degree here, and I'm really trying to drive home the point about the magnitude of the degree.
David was a man after God's own heart.
Well, yes, he was, but he could have simply just honored the agreement and been nice to him and still been a man after God's own heart. See, now here's the question. Would we, let's flip it this way, would we be this way with an enemy's son, even if we swore an oath? That'd be hard to do, wouldn't it? That'd be extremely hard to do. Hey, your dad tried to pin me to, or your granddad tried to pin me to the wall like 3 times. Yeah, your dad helped me out, but he really stayed with Team Saul. So, you know, here's $20. I've been kind to you. Great, move along. Have a great day. Would we demonstrate this same level of faithfulness to an individual we make an oath with?
Probably not.
Probably not. Well, actually, there are a lot of things where we're very similar to David in. We follow after God. We are to strive to be people after God's heart. And we also sin, as we will see in chapter 11. See, we elevate David to a tier that really David, I don't think himself would put himself on. We do the same thing with Abraham. If you go back and look at the life of Abraham, Abraham is an extremely flawed individual. But we elevate him because he's in the Hall of Fame of Faith. But if you go and read those cats, there's only like 2 of them that really deserve to be there. The rest of them were scoundrels. And God calls them faithful men. See, we elevate David to that tier and we go, well, that's David, but I don't have to do that. Is that the answer? Or is it that's David and that's the mark and that's where I've got to aspire to? Which is it? The easiest answer is to go, that's David. I'm me. And maybe one day I'll get to be as good as David, but right now I'm going to be the scoundrel. We may not actually say that, but that's actually what we do. Right?
It's also a little bit easier for the king to take on a man-child and feed him with his, limited resources, which are minimum wage that he gave Dr. Jerry's man.
Well, that's true. That's true. It is easier for the king. But again, does he have to do it?
No, but we're talking about a guy who spent the last how long living in caves.
That's true. No argument there.
Used to his means being what they are, and now all of a sudden getting a whole lot more. He can share them a whole lot more experience, I think.
David took in a lot of disaffected people, didn't he? He did. If you read your Sunday school lesson this morning, David took in a bunch of disaffected people. That seems to be like a habit of David. He's like adopting kittens everywhere. My motto is I don't feed strays. 4 or 2-legged. I just don't feed strays. You like that one? You can use that one. That's on my... I just find it amazing that when you look at this, and especially within the text, and when I compare it to my own life, and you compare it to politics if you want to go down that road with me, we can compare it to politics. We look at folks and we go, well, it's easy to do this. I don't have to do this. I don't have to keep my word. Everybody that knew my word was ever given is dead. I can walk away. But he's David. Okay, so what? That and a buck to get him a cup of coffee at McDonald's. 49 cents? I don't know what coffee costs at McDonald's. I don't drink their coffee. I don't like it. I'm sorry, I'm a snob when it comes to coffee. Any other questions? I know I've beat this thing to death pretty much, but I'm trying to beat in the point of the degree to which David actually does what he does. He's not obligated to do this. There's nothing in the Bible that tells David he must do all this. He takes this ownership upon himself. And the point I want to leave you with is, would you live up to this covenant the same way David would?
I think it just shows that God worked in David's life. He was a shepherd boy. He had done nothing. God chose him to be king, extended, his favor on him. And I think it was just an extension of what God had shown David. He's just showing it,
I think that's exactly right.
And just thinking about a story like more, like present day, but the story of Jim Elliott, and they go out and the Alca Indians kill them.
Kill every one of them.
And then their wives go back to those men, share the gospel, and those men, one of them that killed the men, becomes like a grandfather. They did not have to go back.
Nope.
But they, the Lord had saved them and changed their lives. And so, it's just grace upon grace. We don't understand how we're going to handle a situation, but God, changes our lives, and that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think it's a great point. David is demonstrating that which God has demonstrated to David. Okay, any other questions? I belabored that for a while, and I intended to. I wasn't lost. I was intending to belabor that point. Questions? Any at all? No?
Well, one thing was what did Jesus do?
What did Jesus? And if you tie it to the New Testament, does he not honor?
Well, he says do unto one, you have them do unto you.
Okay. And so you have this ethic within the text that is an above what we would normally do ethic, right? And you see that reinforced. Okay. Any other questions? In chapter 11, we're going to see where David stops being a man after God's own heart. Yeah. Well, he doesn't really stop, but boy, does he really step in the wrong spot. And he doesn't step with one foot. That brother jumps with both feet, and he's all in. Huh? Yeah, if you want to call it straying. Yeah. I look, I do, I kill, I cover up. Yeah. That's we put people in jail for stuff like that today. Well, if you watch Snap, they all get caught. All right, let's close out with a word of prayer if there's no more questions. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for the example of David again. Another opportunity of a shining exemplar of righteous character, godly morals. An example for us to follow, because the world will tell us, you're not obligated. Not only does David obligate himself because of his oath to Jonathan, but he obligates himself to Mephibosheth and continues that kindness. And we will see where that kindness shifts at times due to loyalties later on. But Heavenly Father, that the example that David is, and the example to Israel that David is, and that we behave in a manner that reflects that of David. We ask for these things in your name we pray. Amen. All right. Well, let's circle up here.
Yeah.